Hi, my name is Ryan Tibbens with Tibbens Education Services and Tutoring. Today, I'm going to walk you through the prompts for the Virginia end of course English writing SOL. So end of course, it means, we're in 11th grade. You've got a 2-day writing SOL in March. We still got a reading test in May. That's it's a whole nother story. But for today, what I want to do is walk you through the prompt breakdowns and meanings for the short paper portion of the test. So in March, you're taking that writing SOL. It's a 2-day test. One day you're going to do a multiple choice test, covers a lot of, planning, outlines, editing, revision, reorganizing, things like that. And then the other day, you're going to write your own persuasive essay. Now, most people approach this with sort of the standard 5-paragraph essay format. That's fine. You can free it up a little bit. You do have some other options. We do have other videos available with a breakdown of the test, a careful look at the multiple choice, strategies for both the essay and the multiple choice. There's sort of a whole package of information available here to help students prepare for the test and to help teachers prepare their students without having to eat up a ton of class time, either, teaching this directly or, maybe, assigning it as homework and things like that. So, make sure you check us out on YouTube. It's Tibbens Education Services and Tutoring. You can subscribe, follow the channel. There's going to be a lot of good content coming out, both for SOLs, also AP exams, SAT prep, college admissions essays, a little bit of everything. Okay. You're trying to pump up the channel a little bit. For today, let's go ahead and take a look at the prompts for the writing SOL for the short paper portion of that test. All right, so here we go. Now, be warned, okay? This is a long, kind of a long ordeal, so to speak. Primarily because the test is, there's a lot of variability in it. There are something like, I can't even remember, 42, 43 different prompts, something like that. There's a lot of stuff that you're going to have to sort of work through because we don't know which prompt you're going to get. We know you're going to get one from this list. We don't know which one. Okay. Now, the number one mistake that students make, aside from, not having a clear thesis or maybe just not practicing their writing enough, is showing up without having looked at the prompts ahead of time, which means if you get a question you don't understand real well, how are you going to write about it? Now, if when you get to the day of the test, you go, okay, I'm not real sure about this prompt. I don't really know what to do. I don't want to start writing, typing up my essay until I really understand it. You're there. You're already in the test. They can't do much for you. The one thing that might be of some help is you can raise your hand and say, hey, excuse me, teacher or test proctor, can you please read the prompt to me? The proctor is allowed to read the prompt to you out loud, but they have to read it word for word, exactly like it's on that screen. So they can't tell you what a word means. They can't tell you what a quote means. They can't give you any advice on how to write it. Okay, so what you want to do is watch a video like this, go through the list on your own very carefully, and make sure that you understand what the prompts are asking you for. Remember, you are writing a persuasive essay. No matter what the question is, you have to pick a side. All right, so what does that mean? Well, it means you have to make sure that you're really choosing, I agree or disagree, or for or against, or, yes or no, or whatever it may be. This is not a time for what we might call a qualifying answer, or, if you've taken, say, an AP Lang class, maybe you've heard of a counter argument thesis or something like that. Not the time for it. On the Virginia writing SOL, you want to pick a clear position. You don't want to say usually this, but a little this. No, I'm all A or I'm all B. Okay. Now, in order to help me make a clear-cut decision and then to write an essay that follows that logic, I need to understand these prompts. So before we actually look at the questions themselves, let's look at part of the process. You can get more of this writing process in another video available on the test YouTube channel. I have a presentation where I'm going to walk you through from getting your prompt to breaking it down to how to make a plan to how to write each paragraph. And it includes sample paragraphs for your introduction, body, and conclusion. It's got everything. But today's video, this is all about understanding the questions themselves, okay? So when we get a question, first thing, we read it carefully. Might read it twice. Then I want to check out whatever introductory material is there around it, look at what is the actual question. And I really recommend, I know people don't like this. A lot of students try to skip this step. I strongly recommend that you use your scratch paper to copy the prompt down on paper, put it in your own handwriting. By having to actually copy it down, it makes sure that you've read it accurately. Make sure you haven't skipped words. Read it from the paper, look back at the screen, make sure you got it right. Okay. It helps to avoid mistakes where I skipped a word or I misread it a little bit. It also means that it's a little easier for me to manipulate this by underlining, circling. I can then make a little list, a little outline below it. Everything's there for me, and it's a lot easier to work from that paper. It also means that you don't have to work, with the crappy notepad tool that they give you in the TestNav software. That notepad is not to be trusted, by the way. You can put information in it. You can copy and paste into your document, but it's a little bit tricky. And here's the problem with the notepad tool, and the reason that I really recommend doing your planning and sort of organizing on paper. If something were to happen, power goes out, or your test is lost, or you run out of time and you have to log out of the test and move to the other testing location, go from the classroom to the library or whatever it is to finish your test that day, that's fine. But if any interruptions occur, anything on that notepad is lost. Anything on your paper you get to take with you. Okay, so anyway, what we want to do is read the prompt carefully. Now, I have two here, and I'm just going to sort of go through this real fast because we're going to see these prompts again in a couple of minutes in this presentation. So, the first question is one that I think most people are okay with. This one isn't as complicated, but does a really nice job of showing you the three parts of the prompt: the introductory material, the actual question topic, the actual prompt, and then the reminders about what to do in your essay. So the first prompt we'll look at here: many students become involved in extracurricular activities to enrich their educational experiences, and some even become involved in so many activities that they have little time to study or complete homework assignments. That's the introductory information. They're giving you ideas and background to help you write your essay. You cannot copy that word for word. Don't quote from it. But those ideas are things that can help you in your introduction paragraph to set up a thesis. And remember, very simply put, in a persuasive essay, any kind of academic writing, the most important sentence is your thesis, that one sentence response to the prompt. Okay. Everything you write in an essay is there to make the audience believe or agree with, or at least consider your thesis. So anything you write in the introduction before the thesis is there to help people understand what the thesis means. And then everything you write after it is there to argue for and get people to believe it. Well, the folks who make the SOL in these prompts, they give you a little introductory information to help sort of get the wheels turning. So we have that. I've read it up to the middle of this box. It says right in here, for the assignments. Then the underlined portion is the actual prompt. Should schools control student involvement in extracurricular activities, or should the decision regarding extracurricular involvement be left to students and their families? Take a position on the issue. That underlined part is what you're responding to. That is the question you have to answer. Don't get distracted with the stuff in the beginning, and the stuff at the end, that's just the reminders about what you're trying to do to write a decent essay and score well. So the actual prompt here is: should schools control student involvement in extracurricular activities? Option one. Or should the decision regarding extracurricular involvement be left to students and their families? Option two. You got to pick. Schools, regulate, set limits, or choose for you, or the school does none of it and it's all up to the students and the families. In reality, you might think it's a little bit of both. It should be up to the student and the parent to decide what activities you're interested in, and maybe the school should have some say in it if your grades slip or something like that. That's not the answer you're going to give on this test. You're going to say the school should have the control, or the student and the family should have the control. Keep it simple, okay? Now, that final reminder: take a position on the issue. That's where they're reminding you to pick one or the other. Don't try to argue for a blend of both. I need this one or I need this one. Hey, we all know that the blended topic might be a very good answer, but that's not what they're looking for. And you're probably making this harder than it has to be. The last part there says, support your response with reasons and examples. Reasons might be the topics that you set up for your body paragraphs. I don't know, students and parents should choose extracurricular involvements because they understand the students' real interests. They have the long-term goals in mind, and increased freedom for students is always good. I don't know, something like that, right? Those are my reasons. And then it says, and examples, because if you don't have concrete evidence, if you can't say, for example, my friend Billy, or 98% of all students prefer blah, blah, blah. If you can't generate actual examples and evidence, then you're not really going to write a passing essay. You're not writing something that's going to be fully persuasive. You don't have the logos, the facts, the logic to support your point, okay? So remember, the prompts come in three sections: introductory information, the actual prompt, and then the reminders. Make sure that you at minimum highlight, underline, indicate where that prompt is. Strongly recommend you write down that question on your scratch paper. All right, now Next thing you do, create a little T-chart. I'm not going to go into all this right now. If you want to know more about how to create the T-chart or how to break down your options, how to make a plan where you're going to actually choose the better answer, sometimes our first response is not the best response. And sometimes the thing we actually believe isn't the same thing as what's easiest to argue. Remember, the person grading your essay, they're probably done in about 2 minutes. Like 1.5 to 2.5 minutes. They're flying through these things. And no offense to you, they don't care what your opinion is on this. They care about whether or not you can demonstrate the writing skills required to earn a diploma from the Commonwealth of Virginia. So while you might really believe that parents and students should have, the choices, if in the end you think that schools can do it better, or you can argue that schools can do it better, go with what you can argue better. It doesn't matter what you really think. It matters what you can write a better essay about. I go into this in a little bit more detail in one of the other videos where we go through sort of the whole process for how to write the essay, including sample sections. The next thing then is write the thesis first. Before you make a full outline, before you start writing it, do a rough draft of your thesis on your scratch paper. It's the most important sentence in your essay. If you don't have that sentence worked out, it's going to be a mess. You're going to be all over the place. You're going to have to do a lot of revising. Get that sentence ready, okay? And I'll go into the differences between closed and open thesis sentences and what might work better for you in that other video where we look at the essay writing process. Okay, so check that out on YouTube. Now let's get into these actual prompts. This is where this is going to get a little long. It's going to get a little tedious. Bear with me. I do recommend that you break this up. Like when I use this video with students that I'm tutoring, I actually usually, send it to them and tell them to watch up to, this chunk, then watch this chunk, then watch this chunk. We break it down into a few pieces. Okay. If you want to watch straight through, you can do that too. It's a little boring, but you need the information. So the first possible prompt for your writing SOL essay is destination versus the journey. The prompt is, some say that the journey is more important than the destination. They argue that some people find more joy and satisfaction in working toward a goal than in achieving it. Others say that it is the destination that gives meaning to the journey. They argue that the process of working toward a goal would be meaningless without its achievement. All of that was introductory information. All of that. Take a position on the issue. Okay, what's the issue? Destination of the journey or destination. Okay, so the actual prompt is take a position on the issue. Pick a side. Use reasons and specific examples to support your ideas. Now, again, there's no right or wrong answer. You can pick either option. They're both fine. What you have to do is make sure that you choose one and argue for it clearly and consistently. All the rest of that stuff you can use in your introductory paragraph. They set you up to write good counter arguments with the some people say this, however this. But yeah, that's pretty simple. Do you think it's more important that we focus on our process or outcomes all that matter? There's your first one. Second, okay, we've got a question about volunteering. The prompt. Many schools require students to participate in volunteer programs in their communities as a requirement for graduation. However, some people feel that requiring students to volunteer defeats the purpose of volunteering. Here's your actual question. Do you think students should be required to volunteer in their communities to receive their high school diplomas? That's the question you're going to answer. Take a position on the issue. Pick one side or the other. Support your response with reasons and specific examples. All right, now, so volunteering is good, but should you be required to do it? Is that something that schools can force? And if they do force it, doesn't it stop being volunteering? Doesn't that just become coursework or mandatory stuff? Think about the intricacies of it. We want more people volunteering, but forcing people to do it takes away the voluntary nature of it. It takes away some of the goodness in the act and certainly changes the way we feel about the things that we're doing in the community. Okay, there we go. Next one, number 3, driving age. Because of safety concerns, many states have increased the age at which teens can begin to drive. Your state legislature is considering raising the minimum driving age from 16 to 18. That's the introductory information. Here's your prompt. Do you think the minimum driving age should be raised? Raise it, low, keep it. Take a position on this issue, support your response with reasons and specific examples. Now, I'm not going to keep reading that last part, the reminders about take the position, support your response with reasons and examples. Why not? Because it's the same in pretty much all of them. There are a few prompts where they phrase that a little differently, but I'm just, to save time, I'm going to cut those out. Now, in this one, notice how it says, do you think? A lot of these questions will say, do you think the minimum driving age should be raised? Quick reminder, do not say, I think the minimum driving age should or should not or whatever. Drop the I think. In persuasive writing, you should almost never use the phrases, I think, I feel, I believe, or in my opinion. The reasons that you want to get rid of those 4 phrases is because that tells your audience, this is just what I'm thinking. You're not telling them that they have to agree. The entire point of the persuasive essay is to get the audience to consider and maybe agree with what you think. So I don't say, I think the driving age should be increased. Then people are like, well, who are you? Who cares what you think? They argue with you. If someone's going to disagree with you, you want them to disagree with the idea. Keep the focus on the idea. I want you to stay in third person point of view. He, she, it, they, them. Do not use I or me or us or we unless you are literally using an example from your own life or talking about something that you and your audience would both be obviously involved in. If there's a question about American citizens, blah, 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 you can say we. You and your reader are probably American citizens or at least residents. But otherwise, don't fall into that trap. Do you think? Don't respond with I think, blah, blah, blah. Technically, that means your thesis is not arguable. Okay, so be really, really careful there. Cut those phrases out. Now, in this one, it's pretty simple. Keep it 16. Convenience, freedom. It's a step towards maturity. You're growing up. And raise it to 18. It, increases safety. It decreases traffic. It will save your family a lot of money on insurance and extra cars and gas and all this kind of stuff. There are benefits to both, right? Now, I think the driving age should stay 16, but it doesn't matter what I actually think. It matters what I can write a better essay for. So that's why you want to do the T-chart. Actually consider both sides. Sometimes on some of these prompts, you may be surprised to realize you can actually make a better argument for the thing you don't believe. So be prepared. All right, next one, number 4. This one, every few years, these prompts sort of go through rotation. I honestly don't know how they choose or assign them, but this one was really popular a few years back. And so I always warn students that, if you see a year or two where there's a prompt that pops up a lot, be aware, that somebody likes it. It might be coming back. A lot of students got this one a few years back for, I think, like 2 years in a row. The British naturalist and politician John Lubbock wrote, "Your character will be what you yourself choose to make it." That's the intro material. Then the prompt. Do we choose our own character traits, or is our character formed by influences beyond our control? Now, eventually, I don't know if I'll have this ready by this, this year's SOL, but I'm going to have a video where I set this one up and I'll actually write the whole sort of sample essay with you. It'll be fast. It's not going to be like a long, beautiful, great. It'll be an essay that passes the test. I'll walk you through this one in more detail in another video, but just be aware that when you get the prompts that have quotes in them, in my opinion, these are the better topics because they tend to be a little more thoughtful. They also tend to be a little bit harder because they're more abstract. Notice in this one, it's not like, driving age up or down, or we'll see some prompts later about, like curfews or cell phone use. It's pretty simple because, that you can think of, how does that affect me? Yeah, I want to use my cell phone, or no, we don't need more computers in the classroom, or, whatever. Those are pretty easy to think about. But on the other hand, while they're easier to sort of relate to and maybe write about in one way, they're harder to sometimes elaborate on because the question is simpler. I like the quote prompts. Just be aware that those quote prompts tend to be more complex. These are the ones you really want to be careful of. So let's look. What does this quote mean? Your character will be what you yourself choose to make it. That means that, according to Lubbock, you are who you want to be. You are the culmination of your decisions. In that case, it doesn't really matter who your parents are, or what your government says, or how your teachers treat you. You get to decide the kind of person you're going to be, your character, right? So am I honest? Am I loyal? Am I caring? Am I charitable? I can choose to do those things, or I can choose not to. Nothing outside of me can make me feel or do any differently than I want. That's the one possibility. That's where you're agreeing with the quote. Okay, that's take the position. John Lubbock is right that we choose our own characters. Or you can just say, people do choose their own characters because blah, blah, blah. The alternative there is to look at it in the sort of complex way where we'd say, well, yeah, I get to make choices, but the choices I make are largely dependent on the upbringing I've had. My parents taught me my values and morals. My school has given me all this sort of knowledge and hopefully some wisdom and all this. And could I really make a free choice independent of all those influences? Probably not. The reality is it's a little bit of both, right? The world helps to sort of shape you into the person you are. And then as the person you are, you get to make your choices. But you don't get to do that, right? So choose one or the other. This is why you really got to think through which is the easier response to make. Do people freely choose their own character, their own qualities and values and virtues? Or are these things sort of imprinted on you by your experiences and surroundings? Great topic. It's kind of a difficult one. And remember, you have to choose. So most of us are inclined to say it's a little bit of both. Not on this test. All right. So be careful. Now we've got a little streak of quote topics coming. We'll get a break on the next slide, but be aware, right? The quotes are interesting, but sometimes they're a little harder. They require a little extra thinking up front. So this one, Thomas Jefferson wrote, "Determined never to be idle, to be still, to do nothing. It is wonderful how much may be done if we are always doing." And then a direct question: do we accomplish more if we are always doing something, or does inactivity also serve a purpose? That's the prompt. That's the question. Then take your position, blah, blah, blah. So we've got this really cool Jefferson quote. And he was a busy guy. He wrote the Declaration of Independence. He's the third president of the country. He was the first Secretary of State. He did tons of stuff. He was an inventor, a farmer, a slave holder, to much to his detriment, or to the detriment of his legacy and character. But he was busy. Like he didn't have a lot of downtime. This is a guy who was kind of always working on something. He says it's wonderful how much may be done if we're always doing. But you might disagree. You might say, I need to work really hard and then take little breaks where I sort of get my energy back up, get my focus. If you think about it like working out, if you go to the gym and have a hard workout every day, it's not going to take too many days, for most people before you start to wear down. Sometimes you need a little rest and recovery. You need a day off, or at least light days. Okay, think about with school. You can grind it out and do all that hard work. But sometimes we need the weekend. Sometimes we need that vacation to get a little break, clear our heads, get ourselves feeling good so that when we return to our endeavors, we can work hard in them. Both answers can be very good. I've seen students write amazing essays on both sides of this. I love this one for a class debate, but just consider it's not, do you like to take breaks? Well, I like to take breaks. Are you actually more productive if you're always working? Or is that going to grind you down? Okay, good topic. Be careful with that one. Remember, the quote ones are ones that we want to be careful about. Here we go. First impressions. It has been said that first impressions are almost impossible to change. There's your intro, simple idea. Based on your experiences, do you agree or disagree with this statement? Remember, don't say I agree or I disagree. You're going to say it is impossible to change, or it is almost impossible to change a first impression. Or your other thesis, on the negative side, you could say, despite beliefs to the opposite, despite people's beliefs in the opposite, you can change first impressions by blank, blank, and blank. Okay. Simple enough, but do first impressions really stick? There's the question. Next one, positive attitude. It has been said that a positive attitude is the key to success in life. I would tend to agree, but it's not always true. There are exceptions, right? So that's the intro. Here's your prompt. Do you agree or disagree with this statement about the importance of attitude? Take your position, blah, blah, blah. So how important is it to remain positive, to be, optimistic, hopeful, confident, something like that? I think, we usually see very successful people have a positive attitude about their work or their creations and things like, what their own abilities. That's not always true. There are plenty of writers and artists who really don't feel that good about their own work, and it's other people who tell them how good it is and sort of propel them to success. You can answer either way, but before you choose your answer, think about, what do I have enough evidence for? This one, you might say, oh, hey, well, of course you want a positive attitude, but maybe you think about your favorite singers, songwriters, your favorite actors, actresses. Maybe you might be seeing people with, mental health issues, suffering from depression, people who doubt their own work. Well, if the best examples you have, and the ones the most about, have a negative attitude, then pick that answer. Even if you personally don't believe it, you have the evidence to write the other essay. Okay. Next one, another one with a quote. Ralph Waldo Emerson, great guy, American transcendentalist. If you haven't read Self-Reliance, I strongly recommend you Google Self-Reliance and even just read some excerpts from it. There are several prompts that either reference the concept of self-reliance or that directly quote from Emerson. A little knowledge of self-reliance could go a long way to helping with some of these. It also serves as really good evidence or examples in body paragraphs where you pick an answer that has to do with empowering the individual to choose something. Okay, so here's our first Emerson prompt. Author Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote, "To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment." Holy cow, what does that mean? We'll be back to that. The prompts, do you agree or disagree with Emerson's statement about individuality? Then the same reminders. To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment. Deep, right? You want to be you. You want to do what you want and be yourself and all the rest, but your parents want you to behave one way. Your teachers want you to do this thing. Your coaches say this, your boss says this. You watch, TV, you're watching YouTube videos, you're seeing what other people post. And what are you thinking? You're thinking, oh, I'm supposed to do this. I got to fit in like this. Wouldn't it be cool if I was more like so-and-so? Emerson says the greatest accomplishment is to fight through all that noise and just be yourself. I think that's great. I also think that's a hard one to generate evidence for. Right? You got to go to people who are really unique, really individuals, who didn't sort of succumb to the expectations and desires of the world. It's a tricky topic. Again, I love the ones with quotes. It's cool to talk about. It's tough to sort of make that decision. Make sure you think of what evidence and examples do I have? Is the greatest thing I could do in my life to just be myself, despite what everyone else wants me to be? Or is that, it's good, but it's not the greatest accomplishment. Maybe I should play along and fit in sometimes. Okay, lots of options. We have another Emerson quote. Next Emerson. Author Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote, "Unless you try to do something beyond what you have already mastered, you will never grow." Based on your experiences, do you agree or disagree with Emerson's statement? And then the normal reminders. Remember that when they say based on your experiences, they're inviting you to write body paragraphs about times that you have, sort of challenged yourself or not, or, whatever. Not all of your evidence should be personal, even though you could. They say based on your experiences, use your own experiences and ideas in one body paragraph, and in another one, use something from a book, a movie, TV show, music, whatever. And in your third body paragraph, if you're going to do three or, fourth, you can do a blend. All right. But so what does this mean? Unless you try to do something beyond what you've already mastered, you will never grow. He's saying that growing, that learning, that sort of evolving as a person, becoming a better version of yourself requires you to do things that you don't know how to do. If you only do stuff you're already good at, he's saying you'll stagnate. You'll just sort of be the same forever. You're not going to keep growing and improving if you don't challenge yourself with new things that maybe you're not good at, or at least not good at yet. All right. Again, think about the options you have for evidence and go from there. All right. We got another quote prompt from Mahatma Gandhi. Civil rights leader Mahatma Gandhi wrote, "The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others." So one more sort of about helping others, volunteering again. Do you agree or disagree with Gandhi's statement about the importance of helping others as a way of discovering more about yourself? The best way to find yourself, to figure out who I am, is to lose yourself in the service of others, to get rid of your ego, to forget about your own wants, your own desires, your own, personality and whatever, and dedicate yourself entirely to serving others, to helping someone else. And in the process of helping that person, he says, you will find who you are, and you will find what you value and the kind of person you can be. Beautiful idea. Beautiful idea. Is it true? I don't know. What do you have evidence for? Okay, so do we become side? Sort of meditation, etc. And when we think about for everybody, it was when this was when they wrote this question, you could still drive around and hold your phone and talk on it here, or check a text or whatever. That is no longer the case. Careless and people who don't think about consequences, or is that unfair or untrue? Next, actions versus words. I told you this idea would come back around. It has been said that actions speak louder than words. Based on your experiences, do you agree or disagree with this saying? Actions speak louder than words. So I forget, was it maybe the Albert Schweitzer quote, I think is the same idea as this one. You know, is what you do more important than what you say? Are you defined by your actions or your words? Take a position. Next, kindergarten lessons. This one's kind of funny. In his book, also, actually careful, it's kind of funny. This was kind of a hard one. In his book, All I Really Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten, Robert Fulghum lists these simple lessons. Put things back where you found them, play and work some every day, hold hands and stick together. 3 basic things. Do you agree or disagree that these lessons apply to life today? Or is life too complicated for such simplicity? And if so, what should modern society's 3 lessons be? This sets you up to write a 5-paragraph essay. You can either agree with him and say the most important things to learn in life I learned in kindergarten, including put things back, blend play and work, and stick together. And then write a paragraph about each. Just pick a time in your life where, you know, keeping things organized or, you know, putting things where they belong and blah, blah, blah. Pick those examples and write it out. That's fine. If you disagree, this gets more complicated. It can be a cool essay, but it is a little harder to disagree because look at that second half of the question. Or is life too complicated for such simplicity? And if so, what should modern society's 3 lessons be? You don't just get to say he's wrong. You have to say life is more complicated than Fulghum realizes. Really, modern people need blank, blank, and blank as their guiding rules. You have to think up what are the 3 rules that would guide people to be good or functional in the modern world. That's tough. It's a cool essay to write. And if you have good ideas, certainly go for it. If you're really just like, whatever, I just want to go through the motions, write a solid persuasive essay, get a passing score, move on with my life. The easier thing to do on this one is just to agree with them, but that doesn't mean it's always easier for you. What do you have evidence for? What do you have examples of? Next, employee dress codes. Note that this is about jobs, not school. Okay, there is a difference here. Many occupations have dress codes for employees. Write to convince business leaders that dress codes should or should not be required. Support your position with reasons and specific examples. Okay, many occupations have dress codes for employees. Sure, sometimes that's, you know, style related. Sometimes that's safety related. Sometimes you work at a store or restaurant, you have to wear their shirt. So convince business leaders that dress codes should or should not be required. Notice it doesn't say your boss, it says business leaders. So you're writing to managers, to CEOs, to whoever it may be, people in decision-making positions across a lot of different businesses. And you're going to tell them why they should or should not implement a dress code. Think about safety, think about, you know, uniformity, think about presenting a company's brand. Also think about individuality, think about comfort, right? Think about personal preference. Do I work better in what I'm comfortable in, or do I work better because I look the way you want me to look? You can very easily answer either way. Do not let this turn into a discussion of school dress codes, though. If you go to a public school and they implement a dress code, that's different because you're forced to go there. This is a job where you could quit or just not apply in the first place if you don't like their dress code. So stay focused on business. Next. Computers in the classroom. This is not too different from the cell phone in the classroom question we saw earlier. Some educators argue that every child in school should have access to computers. Others believe that too much importance is placed on computers and that they may actually interfere with the learning process. This was written before most schools had gone to a one-to-one technology model. Still, not all schools have done that, but most schools at this point have one computer for every student, or you at least have access to one computer per student in the classroom, or if your teacher wheels the cart out and things like that. Remember that when this was written, that sort of thing was just becoming popular. So it was more of a, you know, it was a bigger debate. The prompt is, in your opinion, how important are computers in the classroom? Don't fall into the trap and say, in my opinion, computers are important, blah, blah, blah. Computers are important. Computers are not important. Computers are, you know, take up too much time and effort, or blah, blah, blah. But stay focused on the idea, okay? Next, car restrictions. Many cities have issues with air pollution and traffic jams because there are too many cars on the roads. Some people feel that cities should restrict the use of cars and require people to walk, bike, or use public transportation, such as buses or trains. Do you think this proposal is a good idea? Why or why not? I mean, it would reduce pollution and traffic. It also might take you longer to get where you want to go, might be less convenient. You know, so on one hand, we reduce traffic. People are probably healthier if you're walking or biking more often. But we also have to say, you know, is that really, you know, actually convenient? Is that functional? What do we do if someone has a particular disability or they have a certain kind of job or they need a vehicle, et cetera? There's some intricacies there, but you don't have to get into the crazy details. Just think in general, would it be better if we made it harder for people to drive in cities? As an example, my alma mater, James Madison University, a few years after I graduated, actually restricted traffic on campus on certain roads and at certain times of day. They have like the traffic arm, like you see at a railroad crossing that just drops, and you can not drive into certain parts of the campus during certain parts of the day because the traffic was getting too bad and it put students walking on campus at risk. Now, on a college campus, people walk more often anyway. So, I don't know if that's a great comparison or not, but there are places that have played with these ideas, right? So think carefully about what's really going to be best, not only for the people, say in the cars, the people walking, but what's best for society as a whole by reducing air pollution and traffic jams. Next, project-based assessment. Notice this does not say project-based learning. So this isn't about learning as much as about grading. So keep that in mind as I read the prompt. Some schools do not use a typical grading system focused on homework, quizzes, and tests. Instead, students are given a long-term assignment and must produce a project and oral presentation to show what they've learned. Do you believe this grading system is a more effective way for a teacher to evaluate student learning than traditional grades? Is this a more effective way for the teacher to evaluate student learning? So it's not, do you learn more by projects or tests? It's what's the better way for the teacher to evaluate and grade it? Do you get a grade that shows how much you've learned that's more accurate on a project, or is it more accurate on a test? And some people are like, well, I know how to cram for the test. I can just do, and boom, my grade's good. It's not which gets you a better grade. It's which is a more accurate grade. It's a more effective grading system to give you feedback. Says, look, you only learned 77% of this material. On the test, you score 77, boom, you can see. If you do a project and it looks like you've only learned 77%, then the teacher would give you that feedback. So the question is not what's better for your grades. It's not, do you like projects or tests? It's which is the more effective and accurate way to give students grades and feedback. That's kind of a complicated one. And I haven't seen this one used too much, but it's something we have to be aware of because a lot of schools have made a push towards a little more project-based learning. The question is the assessment better this way? Next, hire me. So now we're getting into somewhere we're going to sort of write a letter. The last few here, we're almost done. You have to write a letter convincing someone of something. This is actually very similar to the Work Keys business writing test, which I know in Virginia we use as sort of the backup for the writing SOL. For students, say if you don't pass the SOL after a few tries, you can take the Work Keys test, which is a little shorter and not for everyone, but for most people, a little bit easier and potentially still earn a credit and be able to graduate. So here we go, moving into this sort of letter style of persuasive writing. Most employers are looking for specific characteristics in a potential employee. For example, they look for someone who is responsible and hardworking, and often they look for a person who has experience. Write to persuade a future employer that even though you may not have experience in the type of work you seek, you are a good candidate to hire. Use reasons and specific examples. You can still write your standard 5-paragraph essay or 4 or 6 paragraphs, whatever you want. But be careful here. It means you have to sort of make up like, what kind of job do I want? And then how do I convince someone to hire me even though I don't have experience? So if you're like, well, I want to be a carpenter, then you're going to basically write a letter or write an essay with the intended audience of someone who owns and operates a carpentry, custom carpentry shop. And then you're going to have to convince them that despite the fact that I don't have a ton of experience, I'm a fast learner, I'm responsible, I'm respectful, I'm supportive, I'm willing to work hard, I'll work extra hours, whatever those reasons might be. You basically need to come up with what are 3 character traits that you possess that make you a good candidate for the job, even though you don't have a lot of experience. In order to make this one work well, you have to think of a job. If you're just writing to a generic employer about a generic job, how are you going to generate evidence to prove, look, I'm reliable? Well, because my friend needed a ride to the airport and I gave him a ride to the airport. What does that have to do with being a carpenter? Right? I need to show I'm reliable in that I, get work done on time that I do. So make sure that you think, what job would I want? What character traits do I have that they would desire? And then as the counter argument in those body paragraphs, you'd say, of course, I may not have experience using this particular tool. However, I do have this, this trait sort of outweighs that because I can learn how to use the tool, blah, 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 blah. That requires some extra thinking. Next, job shadowing. Many schools have partnerships with companies that allow students to explore certain occupations through internships and shadowing opportunities to discover whether they're interested in pursuing that type of employment. Right to convince a manager of a business to select you to visit. Oh, right. Right to convince a manager of a business to select you to visit and learn about the work that interests you. It's a weird question. Basically, you have to say, if there were an internship program or like a job shadowing program, and I got to go check some stuff out, how do I convince the person, the manager at that business to let me come in and job shadow? Why should they choose me and not someone else? Or, maybe they're thinking about not participating. Why should they participate and let me come? So you've got to sort of talk about yourself and why you're interested in this job and what you want to learn. And maybe think about, your audience. Why does it benefit them? By getting this great opportunity, to shadow someone, I don't know, in an accounting office, not only, do you get to say you've helped the community and fostered learning of students, but I might be able to, continue my education and come back and work for you someday, stuff like that. You've got to think about the job. So what kind of business are you going to select? And then how do you convince them to let you come in and job shadow and learn more? Again, you got to do a little extra thinking and sort of pretend that you're actually in that situation. Next, the right job for you. Consider the type of job that would best suit you. It might be a job working outdoors or in an office or somewhere else. Right to convince an employer that you possess the qualities required to do well at the job that most interests you. Use examples to support your reasons. So what type of job would best suit you? And then how do you convince the employer that you possess the qualities required? Notice it's very similar to the other one, though the other prompt from a couple slides ago says, but you don't have experience. This does not stipulate that you don't have experience. This just says what job would be best for you. And then how do you convince someone that you have all of those qualities that they're really looking for? We already sort of talked about that. Next, education. Is it a right or a privilege? Many believe that in democratic societies, a free education is a citizen's right. Others see education as a privilege, one that must be earned. In the United States, should education be considered a right or a privilege? If it is a right, it is something that you cannot be denied. Okay, I mean, unless you violate it on your own in some way. So should you have sort of like a constitutional right? Should you be guaranteed access to a public education? Or is this a privilege that people should have to earn or at least maintain by blah, blah, blah? If you say it's a right, just everyone should be able to go to school and have access. If you say that it's a privilege, you have to think, well, what do people have to do to earn their education or to stay with it? You have to keep grades above blank or you're going to be removed from your school, or you have to do community service, or you have to be in good standing, or blah, blah, blah. Your parents have to pay taxes, whatever it may be. I think most young people that I've talked to about this tend to say education should be a right, but you have to remember, what are the reasons for it? You got to have at least two to do 2 body paragraphs. It's better to do 3 or 4 body paragraphs. So come up with what are the reasons that you want education to be considered a right or a privilege. And now our last one, at long last, marketing to children. Companies market products to children, especially through television commercials shown with children's programming. Designed to appeal to children, these advertisements promote products like toys and snack foods. Should companies be permitted to market to children, or should children be protected from the influence of advertising? Take a position. Now, there are laws in place about how you can advertise to children, what ages you can target, where you can, put advertisements for people, so there is some restriction here. But look at the actual question. Should companies be permitted to market to children just at all, or should children be protected from the influence of advertising? Yes, you can market to kids because that's how you sell sugary cereals and toys and the rest. Or no, you don't market to kids because they don't have the critical thinking skills developed yet to look at the commercial and understand why they might disagree with it or how they're being manipulated. It's also a massive inconvenience to parents sometimes. So again, think it through. All right. Now, we are done all of these prompts. All right. And so that means that we have walked through, it's been over an hour. So if you watched all this in one sitting, I am burnt out just reading through and talking about them. I can't imagine what you're feeling sitting there watching it. Hopefully you broke this into 2 or 3 sessions. Either way, If you have questions about one of these prompts, contact your teacher. Okay, talk to a parent, talk to any English teacher in your school. Someone should be able to help you out. Say, okay, this is what that means. Here's some examples. If you look and say most of these are easy, I know how to write most of them, but there's 3 or 4 that seem weird. Don't roll the dice and hope that you don't get that question. What I recommend is you say, okay, well, those 3 or 4, that's tough for me. I'm going to jot down some notes. I'm going to go talk to my teacher about it. You also can contact me, Ryan Tibbens. You can check us out on Facebook. It's facebook.com/TibbensEST. You got the YouTube channel. You can also email me directly at mrtibbens@yahoo.com, MRTIBBENS@yahoo.com. If you need any help preparing for this SOL, make sure you use all available resources. Make sure that you look at your prompt carefully, you make a good plan, and then you write well. Be persuasive. All right. Good luck.